My name is Dara McGrath. I'm a photographic artist based here in Cork City, and I mainly use photography as a means to reinterpret history. This seems to be my current trend of my practice, say, over the last 10 years. I work primarily, as I said, with the photograph, create photographs, but I also use documentation, archive video, create new videos, interviews, objects, all types of inferior to relay my work, to get my work across. Generally, my work looks at landscape, and insofar as it's transitionary landscape, whether it's in suburban, rural, or urban contexts. My practice is driven by the shifting terrain, shall we say, where functionality of one landscape has now transformed it into a new landscape. And by that, history is then needed to be reinterpreted. In early 2018, I was approached by Luxman Gallery, seeing if I would like to participate in relation to the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement with a group of senior citizens in the suburbs of Cork City. I mean, through what I understand of the suffragette movement, I'm fortunate enough in my day job to work in Cork Public Museum, so I have first-hand access to a lot of these females who are kind of basically practically unknown. People like suffragette Violet O'Brien, suffragette Cissy Cahalane, that came from this city. When I was researching suffragettes always want to be very visual, as in, you look back in, turn of the century, black and white film, everybody's wearing very drab, dark clothes. But if you look at the suffragettes when they were walking, they'd wear very bright, very white clothes, because they were very, very visually savvy, shall we say, at that time. They wanted to stand out literally from the crowd. So any images, because photography was coming into mainstream then, into newspapers then. So I think they were ahead of everybody at that time. So, they were a lot of elements that I were thinking about, and that's how the way my photographic, let's say, research and thinking goes, is that, I look back in these historical events, bring the story with me to when I'm actually photographing, because when I get into a situation, whether it's a one-on-one, taking a portrait of one of the senior citizens, or taking a landscape or a streetscape, is that I'm not going in there by chance, but I have all this research, this history in my mind going out, and hopefully I can relate objects and people to their surroundings, shall we say. As part of the project was just not about me making the work, me interviewing the people, but it also involved a couple of little outings, shall we say, with the senior citizens group. One instance, we were introduced and given a very relaxed lecture by Teresa Reedy from UCC, and we spoke about feminism, we spoke about political changes that had happened, let's say, over the last century. The senior citizens, in conversations with that, which they also brought up in the interviews, they got a more rounded perspective of the politics of that time and the different generations through the 30s, 40s, 70s, 80s, right up to today, and how Ireland and feminism has changed, which I found very informative, and I think the group did as well. Also, as part of our study into women's rights and movement, is that we had a little day trip to see a couple of objects in relation to women's movement in Cork Public Museum, as I said earlier, where I work. So I was part of that connection as well, and through discussions with the curator, we retrieved some objects from our collection. For instance, there was a suffragette medal awarded to a Cork-born woman called Violet O'Brien. Violet O'Brien trained at North Infirmary, and she went then on to London to practice as a nurse, then went on to the Serbian frontier, World War I, and then back to the Western Front. And she was very much involved in women's feminist leagues in Munster in the 1940s, and mother and child schemes later led on to Noel Brown's mother and child scheme. Introduced to this very special medal because Violet O'Brien had actually been force-fed twice, so there was 2 extra bars on her medal, and Dan explained how the process of force feeding was undertook under horrific conditions. They were force-fed. So I think it struck a note of empathy with the senior citizens group about how women were treated back then, and how far they had to go to struggle to get their voice heard. We also spoke about a woman called Cis Cahalan. Now, Cis, although she was born in Cork, she worked most of her life in Dublin, but being a Cork woman, I think we can still claim her. But Cis Cahalan was instrumental in the big unions in Ireland in the 1920s and 30s, as in the unions wanted to create a specific women's union, as opposed to the general union, the men's union. She opposed that because she felt that business employers could split a wedge and turn one union group against the other, so females and males. Even though Cis still kept up her job in Arnott's all during her time. She was also instrumental in a strike which resulted in a 30% pay increase for all the employees of Arnott's in Dublin. So these little kind of snippets in working in a museum that we're constantly learning, discovering. And I think that was important for the group, that to bring in objects that, you know, we could actually see, we could tell a story about them. As I said earlier, I'm a photographic based artist. I wanted to have a photographic element of it. So through discussions with the senior citizens of the group, we kind of came to a decision that they wanted to portray themselves in a specific way. And in a specific way, I wanted them to be proud of who they are, proud of their history, proud of where they came from. And the type of photographs I took of them were half-size portraits of them almost looking like the Barack Obama hope poster, kind of looking 3/4 sideways, looking upwards, as a kind of a symbol of hope, a symbol of looking back, a proudness of where you came from. Another element that we worked on was I prepared a series of questions and I interviewed all the participants, basically in relation to their whole lifetime, how women's rights had changed since they were young people right up to where they are now. And vitally important for us to bring the photographs or the artistic outcome out to the public. So that's, I think, we brought those photographs out to very public spaces. It wasn't exclusively in a gallery. Bring it out into public realm, put it in a context where people are at ease, people, you know, frequent these places on a regular basis. And I think them coming across something new on the wall, I think it's in an atmosphere, an environment that they can very much engage with. I think the simplicity of form, a portrait, which in itself is a personal thing, especially for myself as a photographer, because you're getting within that, you know, very close position with somebody else, sometimes someone you don't know that well, but you hope that you have some sort of connection with. So the connection of the image, text, within the public realm, I think was very, very important. Because I think, you know, having that public space and you want them to engage in some way, and I think it can only be positive because it just associates, it gets them thinking, and that's what, you know, the essence of art and creativity is, trying to get a message across, trying to understand the meaning of something beyond just the visuality as you see it there in front of yourself.